one of the things that we at Angelbeat are absolutely committed to doing is lots of meaningful information in a short period of time. The days of 4-hour Zooms are gone. On a related note, what we're also finding is that it's increasingly difficult to do live events. There's traffic, there's wildfires. Last year was wildfires in California. Now they've got too much water to deal with. And now you've got wildfires in Canada and Hawaii. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. It's just a rapidly changing world, and we would just want to add some value in this. Later on at 2:30, I'm going to be talking about net zero and ESG, and then we would like to package these subjects together. You've got what I call operational activities. What are you going to do to recycle? What are you going to do to reuse? What are you going to do to repurpose? That's operational, just like it's operational. What are you going to do to expand your energy, expand EV charging? Concepts around net zero and ESG have a slightly different perspective in terms of they're dealing more with reporting, they're dealing more with government compliance, they're dealing more with summarizing operational initiatives as opposed to those initiatives themselves, which is the main premise here. Let me first give you a little background on myself. I've studied civil engineering. I have a business degree, good ability to understand issues, again, around recycling, sustainability, et cetera. Lots of corporate experience running major facilities. I used to run a plant with 1,000 people in South Carolina. Very familiar with entities like DHAC, which is the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Conservation. We know some of the challenges that people face when they're trying to be the most responsible citizens, and how do you balance issues. We at Angelbeat do lots of webinars and events. As I mentioned, we have angelbeat.org focusing very much on sustainability topics. Later this fall, we're going to bring in many subject matter experts to talk about different issues in this, different products, different solutions, as well as doing a number of programs that are regionally specific. For this one, I just got lots of questions from people who asked me to share my expertise in the hopes that I can give you a little bit of guidance in a short period of time. It's interesting when you talk about recycling and corporate mindsets around sustainability. A lot of this started because 20 years ago, we started angelbeat.com to do programs around cybersecurity, IT, cloud computing, and the like. And many of the people who attended those programs were facility directors, individuals responsible for data centers. They came back to me and said, look, you at Angelbeat do a great job in running programs and technology. We need much more expertise and insights. We need you to bring the information to us in areas around sustainability recycling, which is how I decided to form angelbeat.org as a separate business unit focused on this incredibly important area. In addition to providing these webinars, these events, we are also intimately involved in doing specialized consulting, and I'll share with you some insights there if we can be of help, though my main objective here is just to share with you what we're learning and summarizing lots of other major engagements in the hope that it can help you either give you guidance right now or potentially be glad to work with you on a more comprehensive basis. Our whole goal today is just to have a focused, highly positive experience. We're going to ask all of you to use the Q&A function to type questions. Just let me know where you work and if we can unmute you. It was great just half an hour ago. People were questioning me. We had lots of dialogue. It felt like everyone's interacting with each other, asking different questions. Individuals in the group are sharing their insights with them. We hope that'll continue. It's a little easier just using the Q&A function just to keep everything a little bit more streamlined. And again, please ask me questions. I've just got a few slides. And then at the same time, let me know if I can unmute you, because I really like hearing your voice, even as I'm down here in Angelbeat's worldwide headquarters, which is my basement. If you go to angelbeat.org, you've got lots of access to many slides, many on-demand videos from the EPA, from state agencies, from corporations, from e-waste experts. Covanto deals with a lot of multiple waste stream processing, where you can download slides and watch on-demand videos. And again, you can always watch or go to angelbeat.com, #Angelbeat for the latest information. I'd say whenever anyone talks about recycling, circular economy, there's really one overriding objective that we encourage everyone needs to follow. This is top of mind. It's the overarching theme. It's the zero waste to landfill. That needs to be everyone's mindset, because that permeates through this whole notion of a circular economy, reuse, recycling, recovering, et cetera, et cetera. That is the most important concept. So with that as a starting point, you then have to look at what I call all the R's, no relationship to my first name of Ronald, but these are all the things that you need to then look at as you drill down in terms of what you can do to minimize waste, and how do you make that good for the environment, make that good for your employer, and create a win-win scenario all involved. And you have to look at this as we start drilling down a little more with, again, zero waste to landfill. That's relevant in everything. And how you accomplish that, you can look at these 3 R's, and you need to look at, most importantly, what you can do in your own operations. But at the same time, when you're looking at this, you have to have a similar focus on how you can influence what your suppliers are doing, and similarly how you can influence what your customers are doing. This is a little different than things like scope 3 emissions, where we're going to talk about that a little later. When you talk about things like decarbonization, net zero, you can't, it's much harder to influence how your suppliers power their operations. But at the same time, you could have a great deal of influence in the materials that your suppliers are using. Now you've got a real checkbook that you can use to drive their productivity. They've got similar initiatives. So you want to do that. And at the same time, you want to focus on, okay, I can leverage my buying power to make my suppliers adopt products that can make an overall much more circular approach, minimize any landfill, if not eliminate it. And at the same time, I want to make sure that what I'm selling to my customers is also embracing this mindset. So again, eliminating waste, that's a common theme. Finally, from a high level, this is lower down than these corporate level initiatives around EHS or ESG. Again, lots of 3-letter acronyms that are appropriately tossed around the world sustainability. Here, what you want to focus on is whatever you want to call it, whatever acronym you want to use, we have to cut down waste, and that's what we're trying to do. So, drilling it down, the big thing that's important is you need to look at, how do you go about dissecting, understanding, and separating all the various waste streams that are all different for different organizations. And here are some of the major waste streams that people need to look at. Each one of these waste streams has different issues, different recycling complexities, different recycling reuse opportunities, rapidly changing. So the first thing you need to do is, okay, what kind of waste do we generate, and how does it fall into these buckets? Obviously, these don't apply to every organization. Not everyone is in the medical field. Pretty much everyone's got computers and old monitors and things like that. Pretty much everyone's got food in cafeterias on-prem. Pretty much everyone is buying lots of boxes from Walmart, Amazon, getting deliveries all the time. It's interesting. I used to work at Frito-Lay, and one of the biggest initiatives that I worked on was when you could use these corrugate boxes from the Frito-Lay factory, you would package all the potato chips in these boxes and then ship them to the appropriate grocery store. And then we started thinking, saying, well, that doesn't really make any sense. We've got these, you've seen all these Frito-Lay trucks running around the country delivering product, and then going back to the factory distribution center and filling up the trucks again with product. We want to make sure that everyone not only delivers a product, but takes back all the old boxes. And there's huge money savings, just better on every single level. And, those are the kind of things that, now are much more mainstream. But again, once you look at each of your different waste streams, you then have to then drill down further and you have to look at, well, what can we do? How do we train our workforce to effectively separate all these different wastes because they all need treated individually? How can you potentially automate the sorting? It's a big deal that creates lots of confusion at the haulers who have to be part and parcel of this. The other big thing that we found is the importance of scrap pricing volatility is rapidly changing. Many of these items can be recycling, but, so many organizations have to deal with cost benefit analysis as price of plastic goes up and down. Plastic is one of the things that is relatively easily recyclable, but it's overwhelmingly just thrown out. And, there's I don't even know what the half-life is of plastic when it can decompose in the environment. It's ridiculous. So those are the things you need to do is look at your waste streams and then look at what you can do specifically within each one. Now, that's an internal perspective. The other big thing is you have to look at what's upstream in terms of how you buy product and how your customers use your product. And, the big thing we always encourage individuals is to make sure you're actively working with all of your major suppliers. Look at creating joint design teams. That happens a lot in consumer goods. We do a lot of people are trying to create the best packaging for cosmetics. What are you doing for consumer goods companies? What can you do, for bags that you use at stores and things like this? It's a big deal, and you can have, again, a significant impact when you're working with your suppliers and the materials they are using, and even the ordering process sometimes get overlooked. Can you minimize and increase each order, thereby minimizing the amount of additional corrugate or the materials that are involved in each purchase? On a similar note, when you look at your customers and what happens when these organizations buy from you, what are all the various R options available to them to increase their recycling reuse capabilities? I mean, you could look at things, these are a couple of obvious ones. It's how do you reuse print cartridges? That's an obvious thing that suddenly now, people keep the same plastic cartridge. Again, plastic is tricky. I mean, you can melt it down, but it's often difficult getting from an individual homeowner all the way back to, let's say, Hewlett-Packard or a Lexmark printing plant. But you can reuse them, and that way people are just buying or even going to a central facility where they go to, local Staples or other computer store and just get these cartridges refilled or send them back and get them shipped back to you. So lots of initiatives, just like everyone recycles plastic bottles. So this is a very big thing. And, part of this, we encourage people to be very much attuned to what is being done at the EPA. How are they driving this? What are the programs that they are espousing, either by setting up the guidelines, but also providing expertise and money to help you implement your own programs. It's also true that these same guidelines are sometimes allocated to state and local governments. All these regulations continually evolve. There are going to be new regulations, I guarantee, coming. We heard it in today's opening webinar. What are you going to do if you want to replace your solar panels? What are the procedures involved with that? What about batteries? Some of the more forward-looking organizations who expanded their usage of batteries on-prem, again, you can see it right there. I just took this right off the EP website. Lots of expertise in how do you deal with used electronics and batteries. But, there are new kinds of batteries. There are bigger batteries, as you're trying to store megawatts of power to support your facility without having to rely so much on backup generators or if there's a weather emergency. The other thing that you also want to be aware of is that landfill costs are not going down. It is only going to get more difficult. It's going to get more regulated. Everyone's going to be under increasing pressure. And what you have to do is figure out the right programs, the right strategies for each one of your waste streams. And the good thing in many of these situations, it's easy to engage your employees. Everyone's involved in this. It's generally a win-win for everyone. And so we can help, and we've done this with a number of entities. The biggest thing, as I said, and just to summarize this, the challenge is, who's there behind the scenes trying to pull all this together? If you're a big organization, you can tie it together. But, how do you make sure, You can obviously engage with your hauler, Waste Management, Covanta, ERI, whoever it might be, Republic. But then you've got to look at everything from your, not just your hauler and your operations. As I said, it's your suppliers and customers. You also have to be very keenly aware of there's so many new innovations coming in different ways to automate the separation of waste streams. I talk to a lot of property management companies and they say, I wish we had cleaner separation of waste, but it's awfully hard to rely upon people to accurately separate waste. They do a pretty good job, but we also have to be aware that if it's not a perfect job, it creates problems in terms of the haulers or the actual organization is trying to do the conversion, using I've got some sneakers, they're all made out of recyclable plastic to a large degree, but how do you get that done most cost effectively can be a little tricky. You also need to look at what are the government programs, what's available, and making sure that what you're doing is consistent with your overall ESG, EHS strategy. Now, it may seem like a no-brainer that it should be integrated, but remember, there's lots of different priorities. What's the most relevant waste stream that you should be working on and where to spend your resources? It's not that conceptually difficult to try and prioritize them. What generates the most amount of waste? What costs you the most amount of money with your hauler bills? What technology offers the greatest bang for your buck to get rid of materials going to landfills, et cetera? And, again, that's where when I'm framing this is what we do with organizations. In these instances, I have many people just say, look, Ron, it's freaking complicated. It's really time consuming. You need to talk to the folks at Waste Management. You need to talk to our suppliers. Can you talk to our facility people? Here's how we're separating things. Here's some data. We want you to interview some customers. We've heard about these new recycling programs that can work maybe, for clothing, where a lot of the clothing manufacturers are trying to return to the US. And this is another reason why this is important. With a renewed emphasis on manufacturing in the United States, there's going to be a greater need for more comprehensive recycling circular economy programs when the manufacture of these goods is no longer offshore, but is increasingly be onshore. Anyhow, we've done this with a number of organizations. I always find it interesting because you hear about these exciting technologies, you find ways just to tie it together. And it's not so much creating a new strategy, but what we do behind the scenes is just make it easier for all of you to then evaluate the information, because it does take time and effort to logically combine all these different components. I mean, there's at least 4 different components, and that's outside the government: the hauler, the customer perspective, the internal operations perspective, then the supplier perspective. Then you have to overlay that with federal EPA issues, state and local issues. It just becomes complex. And where a lot of people have said, we really appreciate your time, Ron, is just framing it so we know what to do and we can offer suggestions on, again, what is offering you the biggest bang for your buck. The other thing I wanted to talk about, which is not really a widely acknowledged waste stream, but we see coming up more and more, is water. And the gist of it is, people who run major organizations, facility directors, you almost can no longer assume that water is ubiquitous and always available. And I, just as an analogy, say, it's almost like electricity brownouts. You can see this image that I pulled out. This is from a town in Texas, but there are going to be times when there are electricity brownouts or water brownouts, and it may not happen as often as you see electrical problems, but this is only going to occur more and more. I mean, California had a drought, then all their water overflowed. They couldn't use it all. I mean, there's so much weather volatility and water volatility. You can only look at what Lake Mead outside of Vegas, the rapidly dropping water levels, what the implications are. And so, my sense here is that this is an area where your ability to make an impact as an organization is limited. It's much more on a higher level, because there's an analogy in power, like you can do more solar, you could put in more batteries and have that capability for powering your operations be much more on site. There are much more limited options unless you're, let's say, a major plant that uses a lot of water, which is recycling water for industrial use. Any kind of water use for human consumption, like there's much more limited options. Plus, there's tremendous amount of economies of scale where it's very difficult to replicate wastewater treatment plants, even at very large facilities. So, the main focus here, we encourage people is to be very oriented around conservation efforts and training. The other thing that you just need to keep in the back of your mind is that, and again, there's an analogy to the electrical infrastructure, is that just like the electrical grid has not been maintained to the same degree it needs to be, there are many well-documented cases of that. There are challenges, and we heard that in our earlier talk about the challenges in Texas for an electrical grid that often creates these brownout situations. Quite honestly, you hear about it less, but you've got a similar risk with the water pipeline infrastructure. There are these huge pipes that run underneath every street in every town in America, and they have not been maintained to the extent they need to be. So we encourage everyone to, when you're looking at your overall circular economy recycling, water isn't a waste stream per se, but it is a limited commodity. And just like you need to conserve materials, just like you need to look at ways to reduce waste of plastic in production and things like that, you can do things to help you with regard to water as a related subject here. Anyhow, those are really my brief comments. I welcome any questions or thoughts on what people are doing. I can tell you that some of the questions that came up earlier today are all about, well, what's going to happen when we need to recycle batteries for EV charging cars? That's a big issue looming. I don't have the right answer. We're looking at that. People are very concerned about what are they going to do for recycling older solar panels because they want to replace them with state-of-the-art. Again, we can look into this. Most of the time, we had a number of interesting questions before where people were wondering about how do we do things. I'm glad to help. We know every EPA official, and I think there's some analogy when you look at these different elements of sustainability in the world of EV and energy. The key driver is actually there's a joint office between the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation that's driving a lot of the EV. What we're finding is that in the world of recycling here, it's really driven by the EPA, but state organizations have tremendous amount of authority control in making this happen. Now, let me just do this. Okay, great. I'm going to, let me do this. I'm just going to look here. I'm going to ask each one of the speakers to introduce themselves. So Michael Taniguchi had a question. Michael, could you just, hopefully you're unmuted now and you could speak. Can you just tell me where you work and maybe describe your question so everyone else can hear it?
Sure. Michael Taniguchi. I work at Apotex. It's a pharmaceutical company up in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, great.
Just a question on, and I know this has come up from some of our sites here talking about zero waste to landfill and wanting to make that change. And we can't go to zero waste. We're going to have some waste we're generating. Yep. Is incinerators a viable replacement to landfill? Are we not just sort of trading one type of pollution for another type of pollution when it comes to incinerators?
Got it. Yes. And again, sometimes it's as much a question of what's the lesser of two evils in a sense. And you've got to look at cost and other issues, but there are other people when they're looking at this, it's not just incineration. There's also waste to energy, where by burning those materials, they can use certain kind of scrubbers. Like for instance, we've got a huge Covanta plan a big, one of the world's, or actually one of the, at least south of the border, one of the largest waste to energy facilities. And even as they rely upon energy, just to give you a sense, and we could talk separately about what's, I'm a little less familiar on the exact infrastructure in Canada, but, I know living here and having done some things to the Covanta, just as a case in point, they're doing a couple of things. First, their basic premise is, and it varies, we would just as soon, quite honestly, burn something than put it in landfill as a general mindset. There could be different schools of thought, but I've talked to many people, it's generally better. Now, what they're also doing, because there are two ancillary things. On one hand, where do they get the energy to burn these materials? Because as you can imagine, a lot of these waste to energy complexes are fairly power intensive. So what they're simultaneously doing as part of that is, okay, what can we do as far as powering our facility, trying to use other solutions, regardless of the power coming from the utility, trying to put in place having like solar panels and batteries. So when they do run the waste energy conversion, it's powered by some cleaner energy. If that makes sense, Michael, that's one thing that they're doing. And then at the same time, what they're looking at is, well, with this waste coming out of these huge stacks, what are they doing to try and capture that material through filtration and other techniques, so it's actually discharged into the air is of negligible impact. I'll be glad to follow up with you, especially afterwards, Michael, about what might go on in Canada. But I think the gist of it is that most people are looking at zero waste to landfill as, in most situations, if not the overwhelming number of situations, as the best approach. And if there are any unintended consequences, such as what may be discharged during that waste to energy conversion, or how you're powering that waste destruction, people are concerned about scope 3 emissions and the like, the good companies are taking steps to address those too. Does that make a little more sense to you?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, great. And I'll follow up with you separately about Canada as well. Okay.
Great.
All right. Samantha works in the, I believe it's Massachusetts cannabis, rapidly growing industry. So what's your question?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, I'm a sustainability specialist at a cannabis company in Massachusetts, and I also run the Massachusetts Cannabis Sustainability Coalition.
Okay.
One of the issues that we've been bringing up is vape disposal. It's the second largest product to purchase in the cannabis industry right now. And there's no real solutions across the US that I've found. I also work with some people in Colorado and California to see if there's any ways that we can reuse these, recycle them, or just have proper waste disposal, because it is an illegal substance federally. There's no way that the EPA takes the cartridge back like they do for nicotine vapes. So I was just wondering if you knew of any solutions for that problem.
That's a new issue that I'm not fully aware of. I'll probably say my kids in college may be more attuned to this in a year or two, but we'll see. I can easily look into that. And just so I'm clear, these, I have friends of mine who, as an alternative to cigarettes, vape nicotine. And I'm assuming it's a similar kind of instrument that once it's used, what do you do with it? Am I understanding it correctly, Samantha?
Yes, exactly. So there's two different types. There's a disposable vape, and then there's just a regular battery that you can attach a cartridge to the top of and reuse the battery. Obviously, for that option, you can at least electronically recycle the battery. But again, the cartridge itself can't be disposed of properly. For the disposable vape option, once you use all of the either nicotine or cannabis in that vape, that entire vape has to be disposed of, and there's no great way to go about that.
So that's interesting, especially for Michael up there in Canada. The United States has one of these very odd legislative scenarios where states are free to legalize marijuana, CBD, cannabis, et cetera. The federal government still treats it illegal. So not only is there a lack of, as you were saying, Samantha, lack of EPA guidelines, there's a similar lack of financial controls, and the amount of cash that's flowed to the cannabis industry is mind-boggling because they can't take advantage of normal commerce, e-commerce. Is that about right, Samantha?
Yes, exactly.
Those are two challenges. We'll have to follow up with you, but it does show that as you've got, and I think your mindset is very good, you know, especially as the cannabis industry is just starting to explode. And you know, I'm not going to, whether or not some people have different thoughts, but the way I look at it, it's like, you know, EV charging infrastructure. You could agree or disagree, but it's happening and you might as well just accept it and deal with it. In this case, be it with EV charging, new solar panels, batteries on site, cannabis vaping, these are all new industries that are booming. And the good thing is, and it's somewhat reassuring, Samantha, to hear your commentary, that as people are looking at supporting a rapidly growing industry, the thoughts of recycling are first and foremost. I'm going to have to get back to you, but I make a distinction between, you know, what happened with computers back when computers started. Like no one really worried that much about e-waste and recycling, and there's a different mindset now with these things. Here, I'm going to, well, that's a good thing. Since I'm not nearly as knowledgeable as the people in the Angelbeat community, Megan lives in Monroe County, New York, not too far from you. Samantha, you're in Massachusetts, right?
Yes.
Megan, I just let you speak. Could you share some of your expertise and experience with vape recycling? If not, I let Megan speak. I'm not sure her mic works. But the gist of it, and this is some of the advantage we can do at Angelbeat, is she doesn't have that much experience, but she's aware of recycling programs. Megan, I'll put you in touch with Samantha. Maybe you could just share at least some of your contacts. You're at least in the same part of the country, namely the Northeast. And we're glad, in addition to providing expertise, we're glad to make these connections. That's why people are constantly asking me questions. Like we had someone who works at an Albuquerque healthcare facility on a separate note looking to deploy EV chargers. And we put him in touch with a similar healthcare provider in Southern California so they could share best practices. So we're glad to do that. And Megan just wrote down here that it's for you, Samantha, it's Clean Harbors is the one company starting to do this. And this is the interesting thing. You know, cannabis starts, gets licensed, becomes legal, all good. And then there are entrepreneurial companies like Clean Harbors emerging to address your specific issue. I'll make some email introductions later today, Samantha, so you can interact with Megan and I'll let you take it from there, if that makes sense.
No, that would be great. Thank you. And I just want to also let you guys know about the cannabis industry a little bit. There is that if it's not based in your state, though, you can't cross state lines with the waste. So for example, with vape waste, if it's not in Massachusetts, it theoretically could not cross that state line. So that's also another issue we're running into as well, because there's still some residue of cannabis and it would be federally illegal to transport that to a company, say in New York or Connecticut, in order to recycle it, which is obviously something we all need to address.
Got it. And again, that stems from the same federal policy that cannabis is illegal, even as states make it legal. And then you run into issues around interstate commerce laws, I would imagine.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, good. I will make that happen. Let me see if we've got. Oh, even better. Megan, just say Clean Harbor is actually based in Massachusetts.
Even better. Thank you.
Even better. Well, let me see if there's any other questions that people have. I just want to go back. I'll just put, when you're looking at things, I mentioned this about water, these are the big things is that, for all organizations, these are like my key takeaways, whether or not we at Angelbeat are glad to help out in doing this. If it's just too much for your internal staff, it's time consuming, it requires just a lot of detailed focus. We love to help. I love understanding these things, but these really are the key takeaways that you need to understand all of your waste in your operations. There's at least 4 different groups that always need to be part of your recycling circular economy strategy. Who you're buying from, who you're selling to, who you are distributing your own waste to, and then of course your internal operations. There are lots of different solutions around various reuse, recycle, repurpose, etc. You've got to stay abreast of them. They're all changing. There's not only government regulations you need to be aware of, there's government money available. So even as you're ensuring that you're in compliance, you still want to make sure that you can take advantage of grants, incentive programs. And finally, this is just one part of your EHS, ESG strategy. And just remember that all of these programs need to be in line with what your corporate directive is. We're going to be talking more about EHS, ESG later today. And that we're going to do another webinar at 2:30, but I really appreciate everyone's time. We've got lots of great slides available. If you find out there's other unique waste streams that you need to be aware of, recycling initiatives, we had people come to me, I work in the clothing industry. And remember, there's a lot more manufacturing coming back to the US. So recycling now becomes more important as the US, again, over the next 10 years, is going to have a huge surge in an entire manufacturing base, which isn't just plants, it's all the associated suppliers. So it's going to be a big deal. There's Paul Kearns. Yeah, we might have adjusted some of the timing, Paul. I believe it was but Paul, you can contact me. We're starting this at 1 o'clock. Sorry for any inconvenience there, Paul. But let me just, while I've got you here, Paul, I apologize if there was some of that. Let me just see, Paul, while we're doing this, if there are any specific issues, I just unmuted you. I just want to make sure as we had tweaked this, if there's anything in particular that you want addressed, or are there any specific questions that I could help with? Are you still there, Paul?
I don't have any questions at this time. I just tuned in at 1:30 looking for the presentation like it was in the invitation. So is there a way to go back and look at it?
Yeah, I'll do this. I'm going to do this. Paul, I've got some time. So let me go. I'm going to summarize this again for you. And I'm going to just thank everyone for joining us. And Paul, let me go through some of what we covered here for you, all right?
All right, thanks.
Got it. And for everyone else, thank you very much. And then at 2:30 today, we're going to be discussing net zero and ESG as our final sustainability workshop. And thank you for your time. And I'll be glad to help anyone out with any questions. All right, Paul, what the premise here as we're doing all of these is that we wanted to talk about the circular economy, recycling, all those different things as part of this. And let me just give you a little background on myself. I've got an engineering degree, an MBA, spent a lot of time in the corporate world. I ran a large, in my earlier days, ran a large plant in South Carolina with 1,000 people making semiconductor chips, dealing with recycling issues, environmental protection. So very familiar with this. Just a little bit of background information on Angelbeat. We've done a large number of sustainability webinars over the past couple of years. We've mainly had expert speakers from the EPA, from state agencies, haulers, recycling companies, and whatnot. Though, what I wanted to do here, because a lot of people ask me, okay, what have you learned? Because I'm often asked to do special projects for individuals. And several people said, look, I know you're going to have all these different webinars, with the EPA and state agencies and different providers of solution. Can you just share with us some of your best practices, which is what I'm doing here. Just to have an FYI, we at Angelbeat do a large number of other workshops just on data centers and cybersecurity in the cloud, but it was doing those webinars for the last 20 years in events, and probably about a little less than 10 years ago, where individuals said, and these individuals who attended our programs were often facility directors saying, there's so much more interest in sustainability. We need you to do separate programs on that, which is why we started angelbeat.org. And as part of that, again, our main business is this, though I'm often asked to do some special consulting workshops as well. And again, we just wanted to be very positive, with these programs. We and these webinars will keep them short and sweet. We may not be able to address every single question, but we like to keep it interactive. We want people to ask questions. I want to make sure that we're getting the max amount of information. We've got our angelbeat.org website, has lots of great content. I'll put my videos up here. We've got lots of other videos and on-demand slides from the EP and others, and we're just complementing this. And let me just get right into it. And whenever I talk to people about recycling, circular economy, there is one common strategy that we stress to everyone, and this is all pervasive, all encompassing, and that's zero waste to landfill. Whatever you want to say or talk about, there are many other things you can do, but this is one of the few goals that pretty much everyone can agree upon, that if you're a facility director, again, when I'm presenting, I'm talking more to the end user community and saying this, whatever you specifically decide to tactically do, this needs to be the overarching goal, and everything that you're doing should be consistent with this overriding mission. Now, to get there, you can look at what are the operational tactical initiatives you can do. It boils down to the R's, and there are various R's that are part of circular economy, recycling, reduce, reuse, recover wasted materials. It's all part of the same objective, is to minimize waste, and especially have no waste going into landfill where it's going to reside forever. And that's overriding goals. When you're looking at, again, getting this overriding theme on an implementation basis, the first things you should do is start with your internal operations, then what you're buying, what you're selling, and just make sure that all of this is integrated with higher level EHS and ESG plans and strategies. So when you're looking at this, the big thing you have to look, and each company is different. The first thing you need to do, and many people do this, is make sure you understand just what waste you are generating. There's all kinds of different streams, and you have to look at these and many others and figure out, okay, how am I handling each one of these so I'm maximizing one or more of the R approaches while also working towards a zero waste to landfill. And to do that, it's not conceptually that complicated. You have to look at actions, programs that are unique or customized for each type of waste stream. You have to look at what can be done manually. Now, the good thing is there are so many more automated processes. I always get a little nervous if you're depending on your employees to segment their waste, even though people are pretty civic and sustainability minded. I don't really want to rely upon people, but how do you go about setting up operational programs, training people to separate the waste streams? The other big thing you have to be aware of is that as you're looking at how you process the waste stream, just be aware that scrap pricing volatility is ever present, be it for precious metals on e-waste, to plastics, to corrugate. You just need to be aware of this, because that may and most likely will affect your decisions on how you process waste, and just make informed decisions. Some people say, I don't really care if I'm making less money. I'm giving all of my wasted plastic to this manufacturer. It can be reused. And, if it costs me a heck of a lot more because I'm budgeted for this amount of money coming back and don't get it, I don't care. It's the right thing to do. And the other big thing, of course, is there a look at things you can control. You can use your checkbook to control what your suppliers do. You can use your integrated strategy to control how your products are used by consumers. But obviously, you need to engage with current and even prospective haulers, who are the ones who are actually dealing with the waste if you're not dealing with it on site, and incorporate their plans into your overall strategy. And again, you could look at what you're doing internally. And then, with regard to suppliers, you have a lot of leverage with your checkbook. You can set up joint design teams, especially in consumer goods and many other products. You can evaluate the package design. I mean, sometimes I joke about the products we buy from my Apple iPhone and phones. I just wish they could come up with I know their packaging is critical, but it just seems like there's so much wasted product I get with every Apple product I buy, that there should be a more simplified material. But
you keep buying them though.
I do keep buying them. Yeah. So you look at that. So you can look at your ordering process. Can you buy more and consolidate those orders to be more efficient? And at the same time, when you're designing the products to sell, what can you use to reuse or recycle? Like, I mean, I know people work at Lexmark and HP, they're setting up a whole new business around, let's say, print cartridges, forgetting about just turning in empty print cartridges at the local Staples. Now they set up all these systems where, they will enable you to buy these huge tanks of print materials if you're an organization, to refill them yourself, or you could just return the plastic back to the printer, like the Epsons, the HPs of the world, the Lexmark. They'll refill it and send it back to you, which again is a much better use than simply for the Lexmarks and the Epsons of the world to simply buy new plastics, get it delivered, store it at the warehouse, put in their production line. They get all these different materials coming in, and it works great. So again, just examples of a mindset that organizations need to pursue. As I said, the EPA is a key driver of many of these programs. On one hand, the EPA is regulating all this, but on the other hand, they have lots of other financial incentives, grants for helping you implement your own programs. So it's not just government regulating you, it's government providing money and solutions and best practices for making this happen. The other big thing I always like to emphasize is landfill costs. They are not going down. It's going to continue to be expensive. So when you're looking at things, so what do you need to do? I mean, the key takeaways is I look at things, just summarizing this, and this is where people ask me all the time, just quick advice here and there. But the big thing that happens a lot is you have to do all these steps, and maybe organizations know their waste streams, but it's really tricky then contacting suppliers, see what they're doing as far as their materials, then looking at various departments, and especially if you've got multiple facilities and multiple kinds of business, to see what they're doing, and then trying to model what's going on in customers, and then seeing what other options are out there from new innovations, new investments. How do you get some money to do things as opposed to just complying? And the other thing that comes as part of this, and it's not trying to overstep people's rules, but people say, look, Ron, can you just summarize all this as you've been just narrowly focused on this task? We have to implement this. You're just doing some of the legwork behind the scenes, but circular economy recycling is one of the key components of any ESG, EHS plans. And you want to make sure it's done right, especially as you need to ensure that your recycling initiatives on a more granular operational tactical basis are clearly consistent with your ESG, EHS plans. And you may think, well, doesn't it happen automatically? Maybe not necessarily. Maybe you're not focusing enough on supplier designs, and maybe you're not trying to emphasize ways that consumers in certain parts of the country can recycle items. You just need to be aware of this. And this is where we're asked a fair amount of time, to do the legwork behind the scenes so everyone can come out winning and everyone's got a common set of information. There's no discrepancies. We get this a lot. I love doing this because it's interesting for me because I learn more. The other point I always like to make, and it's not really a waste stream, but I want to also just simply comment about water. And what we're seeing more and more is that water availability is going to be a little bit like public grid availability. And just like you may not be able to get water, even though it sounds incredible, just like you can't always assume that you've always got power. And that could be because of any number of reasons, increased demand or other challenges. So what do you do in that scenario? I mean, the biggest thing is you can just prioritize conservation. That is one element of a circular economy. I think, on-site water treatment is increasingly difficult, especially if you're looking at creating water that can be used and drank by humans and people, as opposed to just industrial water that can be relatively easily recyclable on-prem. The technology is evolving, but again, to use a similar analogy between water and electricity from a brownout standpoint, you have a similar issue with regard to aging infrastructure, maintenance concerns with the public electrical grid that is often unreliable, especially as someone was saying in Texas, where they're a little nervous about that. And similarly, these 20, 30-inch pipes or mains that distribute water underneath streets, they've been there 50, 100 years, whatever, and you've got to be cognizant of that. And so that is part of the reason why you need to conserve water as well as coordinate with your water authority. It's different and not directly related to recycling, but I think it's an important theme, an issue that needs to be in the back of people's mind, because just like power shortages could shut down your operations, water shortages could as well. Anyhow, Paul, those were some of just my thoughts on the subject. I'll be glad to help you answer any questions. It's really just trying to share some of the best practices from my experience in working with many organizations, especially the last 3 to 6 months. We're going to continue more of our Angelbeat seminars to be more focused with a lot more expert speakers who probably definitely know more than me. But what we're trying to do here is just share some best practices. And if we can help with some media questions, glad to, or if there's something more comprehensive, we'd be glad to submit a proposal.
Oh, that's very helpful. One of the things that occurs to me is I once had the opportunity to attend the South Carolina Department of Commerce recycling matchmaking event that they had. And there's an opportunity, I think, for those that operate manufacturing sites to look to their neighbor potentially as maybe somebody that could use a waste stream that they have in their facility that they don't have a good use for. So that's what was happening at this event. They were saying, I've got this. Does anybody need it? And that was one of the ways that they were trying to figure out how to lower waste to landfill. So I think I once heard Nike call that concept resource pooling, but the idea is, hey, your process generates some waste, but that waste might be able to be used by somebody else in their process. So
interesting.
Why not figure out how to get that done?
Paul, where again do you work at? I mean, I know you're a Gamecock fan.
No, I'm not a Gamecock fan. Not even close.
Oh, I thought. Are you in South Carolina? I'm sorry, I shouldn't make that assumption.
I am in South Carolina.
Oh, maybe then you got to be like a Clemson fan, or what would it be?
No, I'm a Nittany Lion.
Okay, so you're up there in College Station,
blue and white.
Okay, so you moved south from College Station, right?
State College.
State College.
Oh yeah, Station's in Texas, man.
Oh man, I'm like getting old. I'm mixing everything up.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
Where do you? But you're currently based in South Carolina.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, where are you located?
Greenville.
Oh, got it. Yeah, and what do you do there?
I'm in packaging.
Oh, God. Okay, perfect. So that's where it is. I mean, it's interesting. I know like Greenville, Spartanburg is basically emerging. And like, what do they call it? Like the 95 corridor is like the Detroit of the Southeast with all the automotive.
85 is the road, yeah. There's automotive facilities all along it from, I suppose it starts up in Charlotte area where they build trucks, and then they build buses in Gaffney, and in Spartanburg, they build BMWs, and then you
Yeah.
go down into Georgia and they build Hyundais and Kias and things.
Yeah,
And then I think you get all the way to Alabama, and they're building Mercedes SUVs. So,
and don't they have a Volvo plant somewhere there too? Or maybe I'm missing it. Probably so.
so Volvo Trucks is near Charlotte, and Volvo Cars is down in Charleston, which
Okay.
is not along 85, but it is in the southeast.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, good. Well, I used to, to share my South Carolina route. So they shut down the facility, but I used to run a plant in Myrtle Beach, of all places. And it's currently closed, but I spent a lot of time running a facility. We had lots of precious metals, lots of coordination with DHECT, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the Department of Health and Environmental Conservation. And so
Whose plant was that?
what's that?
Whose plant was that? I think
It was
I know the
called
name.
AVX. And I believe they,
Yeah, AVX. Okay, their North American headquarters is here in Greenville.
yeah, I know, they've, they used to have a large facility there, and it was right there by Route 17, right by the airport, right by
Yeah.
the old Air Force base. And, but, so
And there was mostly capacitors and stuff, right?
they were multi-layer ceramic capacitors.
Yeah. And then Chemet's here also.
Yeah. Kemet was the other big, competitor also in South Carolina, which is
Neither of them seem to be doing all that well.
no, it's a tricky, commodity business. It's not
Yep.
like, it's not like AI chips offered by NVIDIA that are very
Right.
distinct. These are
Right.
very commodity price specific products that are awfully hard to differentiate yourself.
Yep. And those that are putting in new capacity are undercutting the prices and everything. So
It is.
thank you, Ron.
Okay, well, good, Paul.
Appreciate
If there's any other ideas or thoughts or ideas for future content or things, let me know, but I appreciate your time. And for everyone else, I'm going to stop this webinar now. And then at 2:30, we're going to switch gears a little bit by talking about ESG and net zero. And the focus becomes a little bit less operational, but it's more on how do you go about, and that's my key takeaway. How do you understand some inherent conflicts, trade-offs, both within ESG as you have to weight and prioritize E versus S versus G? How do you then prioritize ESG versus EHS versus DIE versus zero emissions or zero, I forget the acronym, I think it's ZTE. And how do you deal with all that? And also, how do you deal, and I'll just share with you some best practices, deal with ESG in broad strokes, which is a highly laudable but very subjective criteria that means different things to pretty much everyone. And so how do you deal with that as an overriding corporate objective is difficult when you start peeling the onion, so to speak. And we'll talk more about that at 2:30.